This is Jonas Nordwall. I'm at the organ at Portland's First United Methodist Church, where I've been the organist for 53 years. The instrument is named for Mary L. Collins, whose family has been the donors of this instrument since its creation back in 1957. It is a very eclectic instrument. It's not just one instrument by one builder. It's capable of doing a variety of musical duties. I want to give you a couple of different examples of sounds that this instrument is capable of doing. It's a traditional church organ. It's also a traditional concert organ, but it also has elements of the theater sound and also jazz elements that you don't find almost on any other pipe organ in the world. I'm just going to play a little excerpt of pretty close to full organ. This is the Rigodon by the French composer André Campra. Now, I'm going to do something totally different, and it's actually in the same key. This was a tune that Sandy Patty made famous some years ago called Shine Down. It's still in the realm of sacred music, but it requires a whole different approach, a whole different bunch of sounds. Now there's a third tradition, and this came out of the use of an instrument that originally was not called an organ. It was called the Hammond instrument. And it was one of the early electronic sounds. And because it was much smaller, it didn't require pipes, it was an instrument that was very popular in smaller environments. It was also very popular with certain cultures. And the reason is it's a different type of sound. It's more mellow in certain places, but also it allows you to have a certain, let's put it this way, variety of liturgical sounds. Now you can hear three different variations of sound that's appropriate for use of a church service. And the reason that this all came about was actually due to the demise of the theater organ when silent pictures were replaced by talking pictures. All of a sudden, these instruments were very affordable, so churches bought them, but they offered the big difference in tonal quality, and that quality is triggered and anchored by a sound. It's called a tibia, and of course a tibia is the bone in your leg, or it's supposed to be a bird bone, and apparently at some time historically they used this to make like penny whistles. But if it's just played with straight tone, that's the sound. But then if we add the vibrato or the tremulant to it, and there's all sorts of variations on it. If you want to really get the schmaltzy sound, here again, this is a tibia. It's used at 2 higher pitches, but they're 2 octaves apart. And also another sound that made a transition to the church sound, which is the vox humana. And sometimes you think it sounds like goats. That's the 2 small ones and the big one. And it's also over accentuated. But the point is, when you use them together, another issue that gets overlooked along with things like the tremulant and so forth are the use of percussions. This particular instrument has a myriad of percussions, and it's got the glockenspiel, has the xylophone, has a marimba, and it has a very unique celesta. And the theater organ labeling, they changed to the Greek word chrysoglot. But it's a metal bar harp, just like a celesta is. And what's unique about this is celesta. It has a full 61 note range, which is larger than an orchestral celesta. This particular one I've acquired about 3 years ago. It's very rare. And strangely enough, it wasn't manufactured by a theater organ company. It was manufactured by the Canadian organ company Casavant. Other things that I have here are what's called traps, and a few little things, interestingly enough, like that kind of cymbal, real quiet cymbal there, a roll cymbal, yeah, triangle, and of course timp. And I can interchange those. That's what's amazing with this particular relay system here. One of the inspirations for this organ was the organ in John Wanamaker department store in Philadelphia. The original instrument was for the 1904 St. Louis Exposition, and Wanamaker purchased it, had it installed in the store, and it was only a little over 100 ranks. That's about the same size of what this instrument is. And within a period of about 20 years, it increased to well over 400 ranks. One of the things that's a very signature sound of that instrument is its color in the string category. And in most smaller instruments, you have 2 pairs of strings. This instrument happens to have 16. And the originals are pretty mild. There's an echo version of that in the same chamber. There's another set down here on this manual. And there's 2 in the solo chamber up in the center. These are actually molars that came out of the instrument down in First Presbyterian Church here in Portland. And then there's a pair that are theater strings. They are from the Orpheum Theater in San Francisco by the Robert Morton Company. Really edgy, but when you put them all together, and for doing certain choral accompaniments, you can create the illusion of a symphony string section. Likewise, the other illusions are in the reed family, and there's quite a variety of reed tones. This was the original trompet, or trumpet in the organ. And then there's a fatter version of that that was original to this. It was called a tuba. And it went all the way down into the low register. But there's more coming. There's also a molar tuba. And one of the rare acquisitions is a 1914 tuba that was built by Robert Hope Jones, who was the creator of the theater organ. And this is based on the English tuba sounds of Henry Willis. And if you put all three of them together, then for fanfare reeds, there's an English post horn, and then the big, we call them the big guns, it's a harmonic trumpet. And in the fanfare division for labeling, I opted out on using names of pastors I've been associated with here at the church, except for one. The 16-foot version of the reed is called Cor de Wilson. And Wilson was a pastor here at the church in the early part of the 20th century. His daughter married into the Collins family, which were lumber barons. And it's her family that has provided financial compensation for this instrument ever since its inception. So that's why it's called Cor de Wilson. The next one is Cor de Balcom for Raymond Balcom. He was the pastor that hired me. And then there was a very eloquent pastor by the name of Laren Hall, so he's named, and then Ross Miller, and then Arvin Lux. Now the unique one is there's one pastor that I decided to put him in a different division, and it's called the Crumbly horn. His name was Askew Crumbly. The reason I put his name on there, he played the tuba. There we go. Hope he played it better than that. So there are two primary things that were original to this instrument and then were swapped out to the organ grinder and then returned back here when the organ grinder closed. A pair of string tone again. The variation is they're supposed to be like a viola, a much broader sound. And they were original to this instrument. And back in the 80s, I traded them off for a pair of strings that sounded like the... And actually, I have both now. Another feature that was here originally is an effect called a Zimbelstern, means bell star. And in some cases, there's very small bells, and you have a star that was rotating, and it just had 5 points. This particular bell star is not small bells. It's very large bells, and there's only 7 of them. And they're on, right now, it's a random generator, so they don't repeat the same pattern. And I've got them buried clear in the back, because if you have them out in the room, they would be so obnoxious. And actually, they were over at the organ grinder for some recordings, and we buried them in the back chamber there, and they were equally as obnoxious. But the fact is, they're wonderful Christmas time, for example, if you wanted to do like the Decon Noels. The question always comes up, is it something that's valuable to a church to have theater organ sounds as well as classical organ sounds? In the digital organ world, that's been a reality for many, many years. And the reason for that is that the music of the church has evolved so much in the past, actually 50 years. Music that you would say were tunes that were more evangelical oriented are now part of the main church Protestant repertoire. Likewise, there's some tunes that were considered to be just liturgical who are used by the evangelical market, and they might play games with the lyrics. But the fact is that music is there. You can't afford to have multiple instruments. So you want to have an instrument that has this kind of flexibility. And in our case here, we are also a home to the Portland Columbia Symphony Orchestra. We're home to the organ repertory singers. And we're home to a lot of the choral events from Portland State University. And the instrument needs to be able to adapt to the variety of changes. It's like that opening sound you heard in the Rigodon is something that is pretty well required if you're playing with an orchestra. In the case of the Columbia Symphony, they're an 80-piece orchestra. They have a lot of acoustical power, and when the organ comes in, it has to have equal power. And notable applications, of course, everybody's familiar with the Sasan organ symphony, and of course that's the tune. It's but what you don't know, there's several other pieces that the organ is a part of. The end of the Elgar Enigma variations, there's 32 measures where the organ has to come in and support the orchestra for the conclusion of the piece. You can't do that with a minuscule sound. You have to have a major sound. Now, in our application here at the church, yes, we have a children's choir, and there's a lot of times I need to take them to be some kind of accompaniment. We just don't use piano. So I have, I don't know how well this will pick up, but quiet. And sometimes you have to have brighter sounds for kids. And then the idea of the string organ, again, comes into play for accompaniment. And between these three manuals, I have three very distinct flavors. And if I want to go for the full effect of the Wanamaker, when you do have the ability to combine the vox humana, lots of strings called a string chorus. In fact, the string organ in the Wanamaker instrument is larger than this complete organ. And there are three ranks that are not pipe. And basically the reason for that, I ran out of room. And that's the 32 foots. There's three of these that are digital, and then there's two that are analog. And the analog soft is, that's the mild earthquake. The Borden's the next level up. And then the big one is, again, it's the concept of a theater organ 32 where you needed tons of power and fundamental. And in the reed department, there's a quiet secondary reed. And then there's the blunderbuss. And you wonder, what do you do with those? Well, like in the Wanamaker example, I'm going to play three chords without the 32 gamba, and then I'll play three chords with it. With it. It just puts that purr underneath it. And likewise for hymns, when pre-COVID, this would be a typical hymn registration for Sunday morning. But I can also knock it down more. And I can keep on going even quieter than that. So you may not even hear that. I don't know if the mics pick it up. And then there's one more level. And those are driving reasons why an organ needs to be as versatile as it can be, especially if you're working in a situation where there's a variety of requirements. And quite frankly, it wasn't just something that I did off the top of my head. I actually created a job description for the organ here at the church. Then we started filling in the blanks to make the instrument what it is. The shortest thing would be the original theme from Superman, and that's...
That takes me back.
Yeah, you don't do that on many church organs.